They say kindness is a simple act, but sometimes one act done in the right moment can unravel the past, heal what was broken, and bring strangers together in the most unexpected way. This is the story of a quiet mechanic, 4 children with no place to go, and a letter that changed everything. If stories about healing, hope, and the power of compassion speak to your heart, you're in the right place. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss a single story that might just stay with you long after it ends. Now, let's begin. Single dad took in 4 dirty orphans at a train station. The letter, in their box, changed everything. The rain came down in sheets, the kind that blurred the headlights of old trucks and turned gravel into mud. Luke Bennett adjusted his worn denim jacket, tugged the collar up against his neck, and reached for his daughter's small hand. "Stay close, Rosie," he said, his voice low but firm. The old train station had seen better days. Pigeons had long claimed the rafters, and rust curled the edges of metal benches that once gleamed with promise. Now it was more of a shelter than a terminal, a forgotten outpost for a forgotten town. Rosie, all 8 years of freckles and curiosity, leaned into her father's side. "It smells like wet socks," she whispered. Luke cracked the first real smile he'd had in weeks. "Yeah, well, it's either this or sitting in that broken-down van." Their ride home was delayed again. He'd driven 2 counties over chasing a repair job that never materialized. The guy canceled at the last minute, just like the landlord said he'd cancel patients if Luke missed rent again. But for now, all Luke could do was keep Rosie dry and wait. Then he saw them. Tucked beneath the far end of the overhang where the light from the platform barely reached sat 4 children. Not sitting exactly huddled, as if they were one creature with 8 arms and 4 shivering hearts. Luke narrowed his eyes. No adults, no luggage, just a blanket, a tattered backpack, and a wooden box clutched in the smallest pair of hands. His instincts screamed, "Don't get involved." He'd spent years building walls after what happened to Sammy. Helping led to attachment. Attachment led to loss. And Luke knew loss like he knew grease stains, permanent clinging everywhere. But then the smallest one looked up. A girl, maybe 6 or 7, met his eyes with a gaze that didn't ask for pity, just recognition. As if she saw something in him, something he had buried under bolts, busted engines, and silence. Rosie tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, are they okay?" He didn't answer. He just walked toward them. Rosie at his side. The oldest boy, lanky and rail-thin, stood protectively in front of the others as Luke approached. 13. Maybe there was a streak of grime down his jaw and defiance in his posture. "We're fine," the boy said before Luke opened his mouth. "We don't need anything." Luke crouched careful to keep his movements slow. "I don't think the station master would agree. You kids been out here long." The boy didn't answer. "Where are your folks?" Luke pressed gently. No answer. The girl with the box suddenly extended it toward him. It was old pine scarred by time and bound with a leather strap. Luke hesitated before taking it. On the lid, in childlike scrawl, was a message burned into the wood. "If you've ever lost a child, you'll understand. Please don't leave them." Something cracked in Luke's chest. He opened the box. Inside was a folded piece of paper, yellowed and delicate. He unfolded it, his hands shaking more than he expected. The ink was faded but legible. "To whoever finds them, I tried. I tried to keep them safe, but time ran out. They're not orphans. They're survivors. They deserve better. If you have any kindness left in you, please, don't let them be taken again." Beneath the note lay a small silver necklace worn but engraved with a symbol Luke couldn't place. But it stirred something. A memory. A flicker. Rosie leaned over his arm. "Daddy? What does it mean?" Luke closed the box slow and steady. "It means we're not leaving them here." The boy stepped forward. "You don't have to," I know Luke said, "but I'm not the kind of man who can read a letter like that and walk away." He offered his hand. The boy didn't take it, but after a moment he nodded. and in silence the small tribe rose. One by one they fell in line behind Luke like ducklings fragile and unsure. He didn't know their names. He didn't know their story. He didn't even know if he had enough soup at home for 7 people. But he knew this: he had once lost a child because he wasn't there. And tonight he was. Back in the van, the windows fogged with breath and the hum of the engine struggling to heat, Rosie sat squished between 2 of the younger kids. She offered them half a granola bar from her backpack. Luke adjusted the rearview mirror, watching them in silence as the van began to roll. "I only have 1 seat belt back there," he muttered. The boy, still unnamed, replied without looking up, "We've ridden in worse." Luke didn't ask what worse meant. The night was long. The road was rough. But Luke felt something settle in his bones, not peace, not yet, but purpose. That box hadn't just carried a letter, it had carried a second chance, and for the first time in years he let himself hope that maybe that chance was meant for all of them. The house creaked like it had secrets. Luke always meant to fix the porch step and the loose kitchen tile, but grief was a thief. It stole motivation, then time, then everything else. He pushed the front door open, letting the screen slam behind them. "Come in," he said. "Shoes by the door. I've got a few blankets." "Somewhere." The kids hesitated, huddled near the threshold. Their faces, still streaked with rain, held expressions that didn't belong on children, cautioned suspicion, the kind of wariness that came from learning too early that kindness often had strings. Rosie slipped past them barefoot and began rummaging through a cabinet. "I'll get the towels, Daddy." Luke turned on the hall light. It buzzed once before giving off a weak yellow glow. He gestured toward the living room. "You can sit. The couch pulls out, and the floor is clean enough." The boy, still their silent spokesperson, nodded once. "We won't stay long." "I didn't say you could," Luke said, then softened. "But you can. At least tonight." The 4 eased in slowly. Mason, the quiet one with calculating eyes, glanced around the room like he was memorizing exits. Bella hovered near Rosie, watching her with quiet curiosity. Jessie, tall and stoic, stood like a sentry near the front door, and Lily clutched the wooden box like it was a lifeline. Luke crouched by the heater and fiddled with the knob until it groaned to life. Warm air spilled into the room like a sigh. "You hungry?" They didn't answer, but their eyes did. He grabbed canned soup from the pantry and dumped 3 into a pot. As it simmered, he watched them from the corner of his eye. Rosie had already begun laying out towels and making conversation in that gentle, fearless way kids have when they sense someone needs softness. "You can borrow my pajamas," she offered Bella. "They have unicorns. I used to hate pink, but now I like it, because Sammy said it reminded him of raspberry sorbet." Luke's hand froze on the ladle. The name Sammy hung in the air like ash. He hadn't heard her speak it aloud in almost a year. Bella said nothing, but a corner of her mouth turned up. Rosie passed her the pajamas without waiting for an answer. Luke ladled soup into chipped bowls and set them down in front of the kids. They hesitated again. Not out of manners, he realized, but habit. The kind of caution that comes from meals being a privilege, not a right. "It's just soup," he said. "No tricks, no chores in exchange." Lily took the first bite. Then the others followed. The room filled with the quiet sounds of spoons tapping bowls and the occasional sip. Luke sat in the recliner across from them, his own bowl in his lap untouched. He studied them. Each face held its own story. Mason's darting gaze, Jessie's unflinching watchfulness, Bella's silence, and Lily's almost unnatural stillness. She never let go of the box even while she ate. "You want to tell me your names?" Luke asked gently. Jessie stiffened. "We don't give out names." Rosie frowned. "But you already know ours." Luke raised a hand. "It's okay, honey." Jessie looked him in the eye, weighing something. Then, reluctantly, he spoke. "I'm Jessie, he's Mason, she's Bella, and that's Lily." He motioned to the youngest, who blinked but said nothing. "That wasn't so hard, was it?" Rosie beamed. Now we're not strangers anymore." Luke's throat tightened. Kids were funny like that. They didn't know how to protect themselves from hope. "Where are you all from?" he asked. Jesse shrugged. "Different places. Anyone looking for you?" Another shrug. Mason mumbled, "Maybe, but not the kind that's good?" Luke leaned back. He didn't push. Pushing made people run. Instead, he looked to the box Lily still held like sacred cargo. "Mind if I take another look at that?" She clutched it tighter. "I won't keep it," he added. "Just curious." After a moment's pause, she crawled forward on the rug and placed it in his hands. The metal latch squeaked open. He examined the letter again. The penmanship was uneven, likely written in a hurry, but the words were steady, full of pain and resolve. He ran his thumb along the edge of the silver necklace beneath it. "Do any of you know who wrote this?" he asked. "No," Mason said. "It was in the bag with the box when Jesse found us." Jesse didn't look up. Luke examined the necklace. There was a symbol carved on the back. It wasn't a brand or a religious emblem, just a strange looping glyph. Familiar but elusive, like a dream slipping away after waking. He stood and walked to a shelf lined with old photo frames and trinkets. At the very back, half buried under a stack of dust-covered books, he found a faded family album. He flipped through pages until he found it a black-and-white photo of his older sister, hair in pigtails, holding up a sketch pad. On the corner of the drawing was that same looping symbol. His breath caught. "Where did you say you found this again?" he asked. "We didn't," Jesse said. "Someone left it with Lily. At the church." Luke stared at the necklace. That symbol had once belonged to his sister, the sister who had vanished when they were children. The fire, the closed investigation, the way his parents had never recovered. He shut the box gently and returned it to Lily. "All right," he said, voice hoarse. "Time for sleep." He set up blankets and sleeping bags. Jesse refused the couch, choosing instead to sleep near the front door. Luke didn't argue. Trust wasn't earned in a night. He stood in the doorway watching them settle. The room smelled of soup and wet socks and something older like memory. Rosie yawned and leaned against his side. "Daddy, are they staying forever?" He looked at the four shapes on the floor. No longer strangers, not yet family, but something in between. "I don't know," he whispered, "but tonight they're safe. And for now, that was enough." Morning came slowly in Luke's house. Sunlight had to fight through fogged-up windows and faded curtains filtering in as pale yellow streaks that landed on the hardwood floors like hesitant guests. Luke stood by the stove, sipping coffee that tasted like regret and burnt filters. He hadn't slept. Not really. He'd kept one ear open all night, listening for whispers, movement, the creak of footsteps that didn't belong. But the kids hadn't stirred once, like they were afraid even sleep might get taken from them if they moved. He glanced at the kitchen table. 4 bowls sat ready. Oatmeal barely sweetened. Not much, but warm. He didn't have milk, but he did find a forgotten jar of honey in the back of the cabinet. "Breakfast," he called out. Jesse appeared first, still in the same clothes, eyes wary. Mason followed, yawning but alert. Bella and Lily came last, Rosie right behind them like a shepherd guarding lambs. No one spoke as they sat. Jesse stared at his spoon like it might be poisoned. Mason tapped his fingers against the table in a rhythm only he understood. Bella quietly traced the edge of her bowl with her finger, and Lily just stared at Luke. "Rosie told us your boy died," Mason said, suddenly unfiltered. The spoon in Luke's hand froze halfway to his mouth. Rosie's eyes widened. "Mason." "It's okay," Luke said gently. He set the spoon down and looked at Mason. "Yeah, his name was Sammy." Bella looked up. "What happened?" Luke exhaled the breath shaky. "I left him in the truck one afternoon. Just to grab a tool I forgot. Wasn't even gone 5 minutes. Sun got too hot. I thought I cracked the windows enough. No one said a word. They didn't have to." Luke picked up his coffee. After that, I stopped believing I should be responsible for anyone else. But you took us, Lily said. The room stilled. It was the first time she'd spoken more than a whisper. Luke met her eyes. I think maybe that letter was for someone like me, someone who knows what it means to lose a child, and what it means to never want to let that happen again. Lily didn't say anything, but she nodded once, almost imperceptibly. Jake Freeman arrived before noon, pulling up in a rusted Jeep with more dents than paint. He walked in like he owned the place, even though he hadn't set foot in it since Luke's wife's funeral. He was tall, sharp-eyed, with salt and pepper hair and a voice like gravel warmed by bourbon. "These them?" Jake asked, glancing at the kids. Luke nodded. "This is Jesse, Mason, Bella, and Lily." Jake took in their faces like a detective lining up suspects, kind but observant. "Heard you brought home a mystery box with a plea for compassion and a symbol I haven't seen in 2 decades. Luke handed him the box. Jake studied the necklace first. "You sure you don't recognize this? I thought I did," Luke said. "My sister used to draw something like this, right before the fire." Jake's brow furrowed. "The one that took your barn and your parents thought she ran off after." Luke nodded. "I found a photo in an old album. She drew that same symbol." Jake whistled low. "That's not just a doodle. I saw something like this years ago when I was covering that abuse scandal at the Stanton Home for Children. The home was burned down. They said it was an accident, but there were whispers." He stopped short when he saw the kids watching. Jake lowered his voice. "We need to trace the symbol. It's probably unique enough to narrow down." "You said this was in Lily's hands." Luke nodded. Jake leaned toward the girl. "Lily, do you remember who gave you the box?" Lily shook her head. "I just woke up with it next to me. In the church basement." Luke stiffened. "You were living in a church Jesse cut in. We moved around. Shelters, empty houses. We didn't stay long anywhere." Jake stood. "Mind if I borrow this for a day or two? I know someone in the archives department who owes me." Luke hesitated, then nodded. "Just be careful with it." Jake gave the kids a wink. "Don't worry, I'm just the boring guy who reads too much." As Jake left, Mason turned to Luke. "Can I see your backyard?" Luke blinked. "Why, I remember something." Luke opened the back door. The yard was a mess of weeds and rusted tools. Mason stepped outside, his eyes scanning the space. Then almost instinctively he walked across the yard and knelt near the base of a rotting shed. "There used to be a swing here," Mason said, "with yellow ropes. One side was shorter than the other." Luke's breath caught. "Yeah, Sammy's swing. I never saw him," Mason said softly. "But I remember this place, that tree, the slope of the ground, like I've been here before." Luke crouched beside him. "That's not possible." Mason looked up. "Maybe not, but it feels real." The rest of the day passed with a quiet unease. The children helped Rosie with a jigsaw puzzle, and Luke tried to focus on the water heater repair he'd been putting off for months. But his mind kept circling the same questions. How did these kids survive this long? Who had written that letter, and why did it seem aimed at him? And what did it mean that the symbol on the necklace matched the one from his sister's drawings? That night, as he checked the locks, Luke paused by the living room. The children had fallen asleep, curled around each other like puppies, Rosie tucked among them like she belonged. He stood for a long time, watching the slow rise and fall of their chests. Something was happening. Something he didn't understand yet. But he knew one thing. They were no longer strangers in his home. And maybe, just maybe, he was no longer a stranger to himself either. The local farmers' market was held every second Saturday, rain or shine. On that chilly spring morning, it was the kind of cold that got into your knuckles and stayed there. But Rosie wanted apples, and Luke figured the kids could use a breath of normal. He didn't expect the looks. People stared, not in a cruel way, but with that quiet suspicion reserved for things that don't fit. Luke Bennett, the reclusive mechanic, suddenly showing up with 4 extra children in tow, all of them in mismatched coats and second-hand shoes. Whispers followed them like wind through tall grass. "Don't pay attention," Luke muttered to Jessie, who walked beside him stiff-backed and scanning the crowd like a soldier on duty. "We're used to stairs," Jessie replied. "We just don't usually have someone walk in front of them." Luke didn't respond, but the words stuck. He bought Rosie her apples, then let the kids explore the stalls under his watchful eye. Mason wandered toward the spice vendor, fascinated by the jars. Bella lingered by the woman, playing violin for tips. Lily clung to Rosie's hand like it was the only real thing in a dream. Then he saw her. She stood by a booth with artisan soaps, head slightly tilted as she examined a bar labeled Lavender Oat. Mid-40s, tall, polished, but not cold. A cashmere coat, boots that had never known mud. Her presence carried weight like someone used to being listened to without raising her voice. Luke stopped mid-step. Elena Marrow. He hadn't seen her in almost 2 decades, not since the night he'd pulled her out of an overturned Lexus on I-17. Blood trickling from her scalp and glass in her hair. He hadn't expected her to remember him, but she did. Their eyes met, and her expression shifted from idle interest to a kind of stunned confusion, then something else. Recognition. Memory. Maybe guilt. She stepped forward. "Luke," he swallowed. "Miss Marrow. Elena," she corrected softly. "It's been 17 years, he said. Give or take a few sleepless nights." She smiled wistfully, almost sadly. "You saved my life." Luke shrugged. "You already paid for the tow. Plus interest." Her gaze flicked toward the group of children nearby. "Are they yours?" "Not exactly." A pause. The question hovered between them, unspoken but loud. She nodded toward Lily, who had wandered closer, clutching the familiar wooden box like a stuffed animal. Luke noticed Elena's entire posture shift. Her eyes locked on the box. Her breath hitched. Her hand lifted slightly as if reaching for it, then pulled back. "That box," she said. Where did she get that Luke didn't answer right away? He watched her. "You recognize it?" he said. She nodded slowly. "I had one just like it made. Years ago. When I tried to help a shelter. I donated anonymously. It was a private place, quiet, off the books. I left something there, necklaces, letters. I thought she stopped. I haven't seen one of those in years." Luke took a step closer. "You funded the Stanton home." Elena stiffened. "You know the name. I know it burned down. And no one was ever charged. It was supposed to be safe," she whispered. "After my miscarriage, I couldn't adopt, not publicly. I thought if I helped from a distance, you could still save someone." She blinked. "Yes." Luke nodded. "Well, it seems your letter found someone." Elena looked at Lily again, and her eyes filled. "I left that letter," she said. "It was one of 3 I wrote. I didn't think anyone would ever read it. I was trying to get some of them out. Quietly. I told one of the volunteers to place it with the smallest girl. I thought she'd be the least likely to be stopped." Luke's voice dropped. "That smallest girl is the one people are looking for now?" "What do you mean?" He glanced at the others who were still browsing. Then back at Elena. "I don't know everything yet," he said. "But someone tried to find Lily the night I took them in. They weren't offering help." Elena took a breath, steadying herself. "You think the shelter was a front. I think you tried to help and someone else used your good intentions to do something awful." Tears welled in her eyes. "God. I thought walking away meant I was protecting myself. But maybe I was just turning my back." Luke softened. "You were grieving." She nodded. "Still am." Silence stretched between them. A stillness heavy with old pain and new weight. "I want to help," she said. Luke hesitated. "They don't trust easily, especially adults." "I wouldn't either," she said. "But maybe if I'm honest with them, if I can own what I did and what I failed to do, maybe that's a start." Luke studied her. This wasn't the woman he remembered, the one who nearly died beneath an airbag and a crushed roof muttering about deadlines and board meetings. This woman looked human, stripped down, maybe even ready to make things right. "All right," he said. "Come by tomorrow. No promises, but I'll let them decide." She nodded, wiped her eyes discreetly, and started to turn away. Then she looked back. "You could have just walked by Luke." "I know. Why didn't you?" Luke looked across the market at the 4 kids now sitting around Rosie laughing softly, passing apple slices. "Because once he said I didn't show up in time. I won't make that mistake again." Elena's voice trembled. "Thank you." And then she disappeared into the crowd, quiet, deliberate, and changed. Luke turned back toward the kids, his heart heavier but steadier. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But today, something had shifted. The past was waking up, and it was finally ready to speak. The wind howled that night, bending tree limbs against the old farmhouse like nature itself was testing the foundation. Inside, the air was thick with an unfamiliar sense of calm. Luke had made grilled cheese for dinner, which earned an actual laugh from Mason and a barely there smile from Jessie. Rosie showed Bella how to braid hair using yarn, and Lily, sweet silent Lily, sat curled in Luke's old armchair, the wooden box cradled in her lap. It felt like the beginning of something. But Luke had learned long ago beginnings are fragile things. The wrong moment can snap them in two. He'd just finished locking the front door and was wiping the counter when he noticed the silence. Too silent. "Rosie," he called out. In the bathroom, she shouted, "Where's Lily?" No answer. He walked to the living room. The chair was empty. The box was gone. Luke's stomach dropped. He ran to the back door, unlocked, wide open, wind sweeping in like a thief. He turned back into the house, sharp now, voice urgent. Jessie, Mason, Lily's gone. Within seconds, the boys were on their feet. Bella's face went white. Rosie stood frozen in the hallway, one hand still holding a towel. She was just, Rosie whispered. She was just there. Luke grabbed his flashlight and coat. She wouldn't go far, not in the dark. "Jessie, you check the barn. Mason, check the driveway. Rosie, stay with Bella." He didn't wait for replies. The night swallowed his footsteps as he sprinted into the cold. The flashlight's beam jumped with every step, cutting across tree trunks and broken fence posts. "Lily," he called. "Lily, it's Luke." No answer, just the wind and the crunch of leaves beneath his boots. Then he saw something. Footprints in the dirt, not adult-sized, not a man's boot. Smaller, delicate, leading away from the house toward the edge of the property, toward the woods. Panic surged. Why would she go into the woods? But he already knew. Because trauma doesn't sleep. It doesn't obey curfews or locks. It whispers, it calls, and sometimes it pulls children back into darkness. He followed the trail, his flashlight catching on something pale ahead, stone number wood. The old church. Half collapsed from years of rot and wind, it leaned like a dying man against the hill. It had been boarded up since before Sammy died. No one went there anymore. Luke approached slowly. Then he saw her. Lily stood in the ruined doorway, barefoot, her nightgown damp at the hem. The box lay at her feet open. Her eyes were wide, glassy. She didn't seem afraid. She seemed entranced. Lily, Luke said, breath-catching, "You okay?" She didn't speak. She knelt slowly, picked up a piece of charcoal from the fireplace rubble and began to draw. Not on paper, on the stone floor. Circles, spirals, symbols that looked like broken clocks and burning suns. Luke stepped inside. "Lily, what are you drawing?" Still silent, she drew faster. Her hand trembled, but her lines were sure. Luke crouched beside her. "Is this a memory?" She paused, then nodded once. He scanned the symbols, recognizing nothing but feeling everything. The air in the church shifted heavy with memory, with grief. with voices long buried. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You're safe now." She dropped the charcoal. Then she whispered, "The man with the mask came here. He told her to hide us." Then there was fire, and she screamed. Luke's heart stopped. Who screamed Lily? "The lady who gave me the necklace. She said, 'If no one finds you, wait for someone kind.' She said you'd come." Luke could hardly breathe. What did she look like? Lily pointed to the corner of the stone wall where rot had peeled back paint to reveal a mural underneath. Almost nothing remained except for a faded figure with long dark hair, and the faint outline of a pendant around her neck. Luke stared. "His sister. You saw her." Lily nodded. She smiled like Rosie. Tears burned behind his eyes. He picked Lily up and held her close. She didn't resist. Her body melted into his chest as if she'd been waiting for arms that knew how to hold broken things gently. Back at the house, Jessie ran to them first, panic giving way to raw relief. "She's okay," Luke said before anyone could speak. "She was at the old church. She remembered something." He didn't explain further. Not yet. Inside, Lily was wrapped in blankets, hot tea pressed into her hands. Bella didn't leave her side. Jessie sat cross-legged in front of her like a bodyguard reborn. Mason, who rarely touched anyone, reached out and squeezed her foot once. And then the doorbell rang. Luke opened it to find Elena standing there soaked from the rain, eyes red-rimmed. "I heard," she said. "Jake called me." He traced the necklace back to a volunteer registry. "It's bad, Luke. Worse than we thought." He didn't move, just let her keep talking. They were trafficking kids under the shelter's name, using the donations to move them. "I gave money thinking I was helping, but I wasn't watching. I turned away." Luke's voice was low. "Someone turned my sister into a ghost." Elena's face crumpled. "I want to make this right." He stepped aside. "Then come in. Help me finish what she started." As she crossed the threshold, Rosie reached out, slipping her hand into Elena's. The woman froze for a second, then squeezed back. In the living room, Lily was asleep, now still holding the box. Luke sat down beside her. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel like the man who failed his son. He felt like someone who still had a chance to save someone else. The next morning came with a hush. The kind of quiet that follows a storm, not the absence of sound, but a held breath. Luke stood by the window, coffee cooling in his hand, watching the way sunlight landed on the frost-hardened ground. He hadn't slept again. But not from fear. This time it was something else. The weight of truth pressing down on years of silence. Something inside him was cracking open, and he wasn't sure if it would hurt or heal. Behind him, the house was alive. Jessie was teaching Mason how to boil eggs without cracking them while Bella helped Rosie sort socks. Elena sat in the corner of the living room with Lily, a photo album open between them. Luke turned around just as Lily pointed to a faded photo. "That one," she said softly. "That's her." Elena leaned closer. The photo was black and white edges curling. A woman stood in the center, dark hair sun in her eyes, holding a drawing pad with the now familiar spiral symbol scrawled across it. "Is this your sister, Elena?" asked Luke. Luke came over slowly. He hadn't seen that photo in years, not since digging it out of the attic with trembling hands after Lily's disappearance. "Yes," he said. Her name was Grace. The name hung in the air like incense, fragile, sacred, lost. Elena traced the edge of the photo with a single fingertip. "Jake told me she volunteered at the Stanton home before it burned. There's a chance. She never died. That she went underground. Maybe even helped to get some of the kids out. She saved them," Luke said. "Or tried to." Elena looked at him. "That's what I want to do now. If you'll let me." Luke nodded slow. "They trust you more than I thought they would." Elena's lips curved faintly. "Kids are better judges of character than adults. They know when someone's lying." Lily turned to Luke. "She's not lying." There it was again, that quiet certainty from a child who rarely spoke. Luke didn't ask how she knew. He just believed her. Later that day, Elena and Luke drove into town to meet Jake at the community center library where he had spread newspaper clippings and court filings across an old conference table like pieces of a ruined puzzle. Jake didn't waste time. The Stanton home fire in 2009 was no accident. "I've got a whistleblower finally," said the place was moving kids off record, some to foster homes, others not so lucky. Luke clenched his jaw, and my sister Jake shook his head. She was listed as missing. Not dead, no body ever found, but there are records anonymous donations made after the fire, same writing style as the letter Lily carried, same bank trail as Elena's private fund. Elena swallowed hard. "You think she's still alive?" "I think she never left the fight," Jake said. "She just stopped using her name." Luke leaned over the documents. His finger landed on a note scribbled in the margin of one record. "Wait for someone kind." "That's what Lily said," he murmured. Jake nodded. "Grace may have left a trail only people like you would recognize." Luke sat back exhaling through clenched teeth. So now, what Jake pulled out a file. "We go after the rest. The people who funded it. The ones who kept it quiet." Luke looked at Elena. She straightened. "I'll testify. I'll go public if I have to." "You'll burn bridges," Jake warned. "I built them," she replied. "I can tear them down." That night, back at the house, Luke found Jesse in the barn fixing a bike that had been rusting under tarps for years. "You're good with tools," Luke said. Jesse didn't look up. "Used to fix junk for food. Once fixed a space heater for a guy who gave us a whole bag of groceries." Luke sat beside him. "That's not just survival. That's skill." Jesse shrugged. "Just kept my family alive." Luke was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, "When's the last time you felt safe?" Jesse paused. "I don't think I ever have." Luke nodded. "Maybe that can change." The boy finally looked up, suspicion cracking into something softer. "Because of you." "No," Luke said. "Because of us. Together." Inside the house, Elena was helping Bella with homework while Mason drew detailed sketches of the church's hidden mural. Rosie sat by Lily, reading Charlotte's Web out loud in her most dramatic voice. Luke stood in the doorway and watched. He thought of Sammy, of Grace, of fire and guilt and the nights he'd driven aimlessly trying to outrun the sound of his son's name in his own head. And he realized something. This was healing. Not forgetting, not replacing, but rebuilding. Later that night, as the children slept and the house finally quieted, Luke and Elena sat on the back porch, coffee steaming in mismatched mugs. "She reminds me of you," Luke said. "Who?" Elena asked. "Lily. The way she watches. The way she carries so much without saying a word." Elena stared out at the stars. "Sometimes I wonder if my silence did more harm than good." "It did," Luke said honestly. "But you're here now, and so is she." They didn't speak for a while after that, just sat there side by side, letting the past breathe between them. And for the first time, Luke didn't feel like he was drowning in grief. He felt like he was standing in the wreckage, yes, but not alone. And from that place, maybe something new could grow. The next few days passed in a strange rhythm, a blend of tenderness and tension, like the calm between a heartbeat and the next crash of thunder. Luke had taken to leaving the front door unlocked during the day. He wasn't sure why. Maybe to prove to the universe he wasn't afraid anymore, or maybe because part of him still expected Grace to walk through it. The house was alive in a way it hadn't been in years. Rosie giggled as Bella braided her hair. Mason quietly mapped the house on graph paper, noting where the floor creaked and which windows faced the morning sun. Jesse took apart a broken toaster Luke had given up on years ago and somehow made it hum again. But Luke knew something darker was moving beneath the surface. And it came to a head when Jake showed up unannounced on a Wednesday morning gravel, crunching beneath his boots like warning bells. Luke met him on the porch. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Jake didn't joke, didn't smile. He held up a folder. "I found something." They sat at the kitchen table while the kids played outside under Elena's watchful eye. Jake flipped open the file, revealing old reports, bank statements, handwritten lists. The Stanton home wasn't just corrupt, it was part of a wider network. A quiet one. Money filtered through fake charities, adoption scams, even a few city officials. Most of it was covered up after the fire. Luke scanned the documents. His stomach twisted. Jake continued, voice low. "But here's what hit me. There was a woman who tried to blow the whistle before the fire. A staff member named Grace Marlowe. She filed a report to CPS anonymously." "Marlowe," Luke whispered. "Not Bennett. She changed her name. Likely to protect you. Or the kids. She disappeared from records 2 weeks before the fire. Witnesses claim she fled with 3 children. But no one ever followed up." Luke sat back, blood draining from his face. She took them." "Not to sell," Jake said quickly. "To save. My guess, Jesse, Bella, and Mason were those 3, and Lily came later." Luke couldn't speak. He just stared at the grain of the table until it blurred. "She wasn't running," Jake said gently. "She was rescuing." Outside, laughter rose like a lifeline. Rosie chasing Bella through the weeds. Lily's small giggles soft and free. Luke forced himself to look up. Where did she go? "There's more," Jake said, voice tightening. "I traced some of the funds, same ones Elena donated, to an address. A rural property 2 counties over. Shut down now. But it belonged to a shell foundation Grace supposedly helped run under a false name." Luke stood, his body already in motion. "Let's go." Jake reached out, stopping him. "One more thing. That symbol on the necklace. It's not just Grace's mark. It's a modified Celtic rune for protection, but also silence. I think she knew something would come for them. For her. So she left the only breadcrumbs she could." Luke's hand fell away from the doorframe. His voice broke. "She tried to tell me. She tried to protect everyone." Jake nodded. "You ready to follow where it leads?" Luke didn't hesitate. "I'm long past ready." They drove 2 hours into the hills, following dirt roads that twisted like regret. The house they found was more shack than home, shutters, dangling roof partially caved, but something about it felt familiar. Luke stepped out slowly, heart pounding. As they pushed open the warped door, dust spiraled in the air like ghosts. Inside, time had stopped. Broken furniture, empty cans, an old mattress on the floor. But the walls told the story. Symbols, dozens of them. Spirals, circles. The same marks Lily had drawn. She was here, Luke whispered. She taught them how to remember. In the corner, Jake uncovered a metal box rusted shut. He pried it open with a crowbar. Inside, a stack of photos, a handful of letters, and a notebook. Luke opened the notebook. The handwriting hit him like thunder. "Grace's. They'll come for me soon. I can feel it. If I disappear, if you find this, know that I did it for them. I taught them how to see the patterns, how to find each other when the world tries to break them apart. Tell Luke. Tell him I never stopped watching. He just had to look." Luke sat down hard on the floor, the notebook pressed to his chest like a shield against the ache. Jake stood quietly, eyes scanning the doorway. She was building something here. A new life. A plan to expose it all. And they stopped her before she could. Luke wiped his eyes, breathing slow, deep, heavy. "Then we finish what she started." Back at the house, Jesse was waiting on the porch when they returned. His face was pale, eyes narrowed. "You were gone too long," he said. I thought maybe Luke stepped forward and placed a hand on Jesse's shoulder. "I found her, Jesse. I found out the truth." Jesse didn't speak, but he nodded once firmly, and for the first time he leaned into the touch, not away. That night, Luke gathered them all around the living room. Rosie, Jesse, Mason, Bella, Lily, Elena, Jake, He told them everything. Grace, the fire, the children she saved, the truth hidden behind the lies. No one interrupted. No one ran. And when he was done, Lily whispered, so she was the first home. Luke looked at her eyes damp. She was, and now? This is the second. Elena squeezed his hand. And Luke, once a man broken by silence, found himself held by voices, by names, by the children of a woman who refused to let evil win. The ashes were still there, but something beautiful was rising from them. Dawn broke cold and silver, casting long shadows through the thin curtains of Luke's kitchen. The farmhouse smelled of toast and cinnamon from Rosie's experiments, but a tension hung in the air thinner than fear, heavier than silence. Luke stood at the sink staring at the woods beyond the back fence. His hands were wet from rinsing dishes, but he hadn't moved in minutes. His thoughts were drifting to the photo of Grace the notebook in the tin box, the symbols she'd scrawled across that safe house wall like prayers. She hadn't just disappeared. She'd laid a trail, and Luke was finally ready to follow it. Jake arrived just after breakfast, setting down a manila envelope thicker than usual. He didn't sit right away. I ran the names on the foundation registry, he said, tapping the envelope. One of them just resurfaced. Harold Metz, former director of foster services in 3 counties. Retired quietly after the fire. He's now running a counseling center in Westfield. Luke frowned. And you think it's connected, I'd bet everything on it. Elena, seated near the fireplace with her laptop open, glanced up. Metz processed half the emergency placements from Stanton Home. If someone wanted to quietly reassign children, he was the man to do it. Luke looked toward the hallway where the kids were gathered, sorting socks and whispering over cartoons. His heart clenched. "We're running out of time," he said. "They're going to come for Lily again." Jake nodded. "I think she's the key. She remembers something they want buried. And Grace knew it," Luke added. "She taught her how to hide it in plain sight. They didn't say it out loud, but they all understood. If the wrong people realized that Lily remembered too much, she wouldn't be safe. Not in this house. Not anywhere." Elena closed her laptop. "Then we take it to them. We go public." Jake tilted his head. "You sure? That's not just burning bridges. That's pouring gasoline on the whole town." Elena met his gaze without blinking. Let it burn. They arrived at the Westfield Center that afternoon. From the outside it looked innocuous. Beige siding-trimmed hedges, a wooden sign that read, "Pathways to Healing." Luke had never liked euphemisms, especially ones that smelled like bleach and denial. Jake went in first, using an old press badge. Elena followed, posing as a donor. Luke waited in the truck, watching the building, feeling like something old and primal was about to wake. 15 minutes later, Jake returned, expression tight. "He's here. Harold Metz. Older, slower, but definitely him." I caught him lying about funding sources in under 5 questions. Elena came out moments after. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. "He knows who Grace is." He flinched when I said her name. Luke leaned forward. "He know where she is." Jake shook his head, said she was a ghost, that she vanished into kindness. Like it was a disease. Luke clenched the steering wheel. She was trying to keep kids like mine alive, and he talks like she was the problem. That's the whole machine, Jake said. They built a system where being kind is suspicious. Luke nodded slowly. Then it's time to tear it down. Back at home, the mood had changed. The kids sensed something coming, something bigger than words. Lily was quiet again, more inward, like she was pulling pieces of herself back inside for protection. After dinner, Luke found her alone in the living room, sitting on the rug, staring at the spiral pendant from the box. Her small fingers turned it over and over as if hoping it would unlock a memory she couldn't quite reach. He sat beside her. "Can I tell you something about Grace?" he asked. Lily nodded without looking up. "When I was your age, she used to draw pictures of a place she wanted to build. A big house in the hills. Not fancy, just safe. She called it the Hollow. Said it'd be for kids who had nowhere else to go. Lily finally looked up. Like this house, Luke smiled. Exactly like this house. She whispered, "She saved me." "I know, but she's gone." "Not really," he said. "Not if what she taught you is still here. Not if the people she saved grow up to save someone else." Lily held the necklace tightly in her fist, then leaned into him, her small body curling like a comma into his side. "Do you think she knew you'd find me?" she asked. Luke swallowed hard. "I think she hoped, and sometimes hope's the strongest kind of knowing there is." That night, Luke pulled down a box from the attic he hadn't touched in years. Inside, Grace's old journals, school awards, newspaper clippings. He laid them out across the kitchen table. Elena joined him quietly, followed by Jake. They pored through the pages until midnight, matching symbols, handwriting names that had once seemed meaningless. And then, tucked into a crumbling envelope, Luke found it. A map, hand-drawn, crude but clear, marked with spirals and a single word, "Return." Jake leaned in. "That's not just a place, that's a plan." Luke nodded, heart pounding. Grace hadn't just hidden the children. She'd hidden herself, and she wanted them to find her. "Let's go," Luke whispered. The past was calling, and this time he wouldn't let it go unanswered. The wind was wrong that night. It wasn't the kind that whistled through the eaves or stirred lazy leaves outside the window. It was a stillness before the rupture, thick and waiting. Luke felt it deep in his chest as he stared out into the moonless dark. Rosie had fallen asleep early, curled in a patchwork blanket on the couch beside Lily. Jesse and Mason were in the barn finishing a battery-powered lantern project. Bella was reading by flashlight, her lips silently mouthing the words. Elena and Jake were in the kitchen double-checking the files, cross-referencing the map Grace had drawn, now traced carefully onto new paper with Jake's neat, patient handwriting. They were so close. The plan was set in the morning. They'd drive to the coordinates Grace had left just beyond Carson Ridge, a place so off-grid it hadn't been touched by any zoning map since 1998. If she was still alive, or if there were any final truths left behind, they'd find them there. But Luke couldn't shake the unease. It hummed in his ears like a radio left just off station. Then the power went out. Not with a flicker, not with a warning, just gone all at once. The overhead lights snapped dark. Rosie's nightlight in the hallway blinked out. The barn's soft hum ceased. Luke stood. Jake rose from the table. That's not just wind. Outside, tires crunched on gravel. Not one car. Several. Luke crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled the curtain back an inch. He counted 3 black SUVs, no markings, no license plates. The engines didn't cut. The lights stayed on, flooding the front yard in sterile white. Elena's voice was calm but thin. "It's them." Jake grabbed his satchel. "I've got the evidence. But if they're here for Lily, they're not taking her," Luke said, already moving. "Not tonight. Not ever." He turned to Jesse, who had just come through the back door, saw the headlights and froze. "Basement," Luke said. "Take everyone. Mason, Bella, Rosie, Lily, now." Jesse nodded without argument. He sprinted toward the living room. Luke watched him go, a knot forming in his chest. This boy who had once flinched at footsteps was now leading children to safety. Luke grabbed the shotgun from behind the kitchen door, not loaded, but it didn't need to be. He slung it over his shoulder and stepped out onto the porch. The front door creaked open like a challenge. The wind was rising now, cold and sharp. A man stepped out of the SUV, late 50s, clean-cut, tailored coat. Everything about him said government, but none of it said good. "Mr. Bennett," he said, voice flat. "We're here for the girl." Luke's jaw tightened. "You'll need a warrant. We have authority. Not in this house you don't." The man tilted his head. "We can make this easier for you." Luke stepped off the porch, walking slowly, deliberately, until the barrel of the shotgun rested against his forearm. "She's not property. She's a child. She's a liability." "No," Luke said. "You are." The man's smile flickered just for a moment. You think standing out here with an empty gun makes you brave? No, Luke said. Loving someone enough to stand in front of the darkness, that's what makes you brave. Inside, Elena was helping Jake upload the files to a secure server. Photos of bank trails, voice memos from a whistleblower, Grace's journal, entries, names tied to placement records, everything Metz tried to bury, now rising. Downstairs in the hidden corner of the basement, Lily clutched the pendant. Her eyes were closed, but she wasn't scared. "Rosie," she whispered. "Tell him I remember now." Rosie blinked. Remember what Lily's voice was calm. The door where they kept the ones who didn't come back. The man with the gloves. His name was Metz. I heard it once. Upstairs, Luke stood his ground as the man in the coat gestured to his team. 3 men in black stepped forward. And then the world erupted. Sirens. Bright blue and red lights slicing through the night. A second line of vehicles came down the gravel local police cruisers, deputies, and behind them a sedan with Jake's contact from the district attorney's office. Jake burst onto the porch. "Told you that upload would pay off." Elena stood behind him holding a printed copy of the warrant they had secured, this one with a judge's seal. The man in the coat froze. "You're interfering with a federal operation," he snapped. "No," the deputy behind him said, stepping forward, badge gleaming. "You're trespassing. And your operation just got exposed." The SUVs began to back up, but before they could vanish, Lily stepped outside barefoot and trembling, but her voice was steel. "That's the man," she said, pointing to the leader. Every adult on the porch turned to her. Rosie stood beside her like a lion cub, her small shoulders squared. "He was at the home," Lily continued. "He locked the door. He said we were too small to be missed." The man paled. "She's delusional." Elena stepped forward. "And we have 3 independent witnesses' digital proof and a sworn affidavit that says otherwise." The silence that followed was deafening. Luke lowered the shotgun. Lily walked over to him, took his hand, and whispered, "It's over." He knelt, face lined with everything he'd held back for years. Not over Kiddo, but we're not running anymore. Behind them, the officers took the man into custody. Jake handed off the files, and Elena, her breath shaking, finally let her tears fall not from fear, but from relief. Later, as the house quieted again, Luke stood by the same window where the chapter began. Jessie came up beside him. "Why'd they come for her now?" Jessie asked. Luke looked at him. "Because they thought we were alone. And we weren't." Luke turned to him fully. No, not for a second, and for the first time Jessie let the truth in. They were a family, not by blood, by choice. Mourning didn't come with celebration. It came with stillness, the kind that settled into the bones after a storm when every breath felt like borrowed peace. The farmhouse was quiet. Outside, the sky was soft gray and dew clung to the grass like memory. The SUVs were gone. The men were gone. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, Luke's land felt his again. He stood in the doorway to the kitchen, a mug of coffee warming his hands, and watched Jessie at the table with Rosie and Mason. They were folding paper cranes, Rosie's latest obsession after watching a documentary on healing traditions. "Each one's a wish," Rosie explained, holding up a blue one with slightly crooked wings. "For what?" Jessie asked. "For whatever your heart wants most." Jessie didn't answer. He just kept folding his rough fingers, surprisingly gentle on the delicate paper. Bella sat nearby, reading quietly, her feet swinging. Lily stood by the window, sketching the sunrise in a little notebook Luke hadn't known she had. Elena beside her offered soft suggestions, but mostly just watched her draw. Her presence had become less like a guest and more like an old tree-rooted, sheltering patient. Jake entered last, setting down a file and rubbing his temples. "The district attorney's office is moving fast," he said. "They've opened an investigation on Metz and 3 others. The media got the first report this morning." He handed the file to Luke. "You're mentioned." Luke raised an eyebrow. "They're calling you the mechanic who made them speak." Jake grinned. A little dramatic, but catchy. Luke shook his head, amused, but something tugged at the corner of his mouth. They got it wrong. Jake tilted his head. How so? I didn't make them speak, Luke said. They already had voices. I just stayed long enough to hear them. That afternoon, a letter arrived. Not an email, not a phone call. A letter. The envelope was aged, hand-addressed in ink that trembled slightly like it had waited too long to be read. Luke opened it slowly at the dining table, heart already bracing. Inside was a single page. Luke, if you're reading this, it means you found them. I always believed you would. I watched for years hidden quiet, but always nearby. I couldn't come back. Not after what I saw. Not after the things I couldn't stop. But I left the clues. I trusted you'd understand the signs. You always saw what others missed even as a boy. The world tried to turn kindness into weakness. But you made it strong again. You turned a broken house into a sanctuary. You made them a home. Tell Lily I'm proud of her. Tell Rosie her laugh sounds like hope. Tell Jesse he was never meant to carry the weight alone. And tell yourself this, you were always enough. I love you. Grace Luke read it once, then again, and again. When he looked up, tears were falling silent and steady. Rosie saw. She didn't ask. She just came over and wrapped her arms around his middle. Lily joined. Then Jesse. Then Mason, then Bella. And finally Elena, her hand slipping into his. A family tangled together by pain choice and the grace of survival. The following week, the adoption hearing was held in the courthouse 2 towns over. Elena came in a dark green suit, calm and composed. Jake wore a tie for the first time in a decade. Rosie held Lily's hand the entire time. Jesse stood tall beside Luke, who had trimmed his beard and ironed his best shirt. The judge, a silver-haired woman with a tired face and kind eyes, reviewed the files in silence. When she finally looked up, her gaze was direct. These children have endured more than most adults, she said. They've lost homes, names, and pieces of their innocence. And yet, I see in this room something far rarer. She turned to Luke. You didn't just take them in. You listened. You waited. You allowed them space to become whole. Then to the kids. And you each of you found your voices again. That's no small thing. She stamped the papers. Effective immediately, Jesse Mason Bella and Lily Bennett are legally recognized as members of the Bennett family. Cheers broke out in the courtroom. Rosie screamed. Elena laughed through tears. Jake whooped loud enough to make the bailiff jump. Luke, quiet steady, Luke simply closed his eyes and exhaled. That night, back at the farmhouse, they held a celebration. Rosie insisted on cupcakes. Mason created origami place cards for everyone. Bella curated a playlist of songs about new beginnings. Jesse grilled hot dogs and pretended to hate it, but smiled the whole time. Near the fire pit, Luke stood with Elena watching the stars blink into the sky. She'd be proud of you, Elena said. Luke nodded slowly. I hope she knows. Elena reached into her coat and handed him something. The necklace. The one from the box. I think Lily would want you to have it. Luke turned it over in his palm, the spiral catching the firelight. She always did believe in circles, he murmured. She believed in you. He looked at Elena. The way her eyes shone not just with grief, but with faith, with something reborn. I'm not done, he said. This house, this land, it can be more. She smiled. Then let's make it more. Luke took a deep breath, feeling the night air fill his lungs not with dread, but with promise. In the distance, Lily's voice rose with Rosie's laughter. For the first time in years, Luke didn't flinch at the sound. He stepped toward it. The first snowfall came early that year. It began as a whisper, just flurries in the afternoon light barely noticeable against the pale November sky. But by evening, the world outside the farmhouse had turned soft and white, a blanket pulled over the scars of a long season. Inside, the fire crackled gently. Rosie sat cross-legged by the hearth helping Lily decorate pine cones with glitter and string. Jesse read from a book he never would have touched 6 months ago, his brow furrowed with focus while Mason built a miniature version of the house from scraps of wood and cardboard. Bella hummed as she made cocoa in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, face dusted with cinnamon and pride. Luke watched it all from the doorway, arms crossed his heart, both quiet and full. This was what healing looked like. Not fireworks, not fanfare. Just warmth. Consistency. The steady thrum of love becoming normal again. Elena stepped beside him, her coat still dusted with snow. She'd returned from town with a letter clutched in her hand, cheeks pink from the cold. "It's here," she said, holding it out. Luke took the envelope, eyes scanning the return address. New Haven County, Bureau of Records. Inside was the final confirmation. Grace Marlowe, registered as legally deceased in 2009, was now formally reclassified as presumed alive, status unknown. The file would be reopened. Investigators, spurred by the evidence Luke and Jake had unearthed, were tracing new leads that stretched beyond state lines. They hadn't found her yet. But the world was no longer pretending she didn't matter. Luke nodded, folding the letter carefully. She'd have wanted it that way. Elena hesitated, then said, "There's something else." She reached into her bag and pulled out the wooden box. The same one Lily had clutched the night they met. The corners were scuffed now, the latch a little looser, but it still held a weight that could silence any room. "We never checked the false bottom," she said quietly. Luke's brow furrowed. Elena nodded. Jake noticed it yesterday. It took him 2 hours with a flashlight and a pair of tweezers. She opened the box, lifted the lining, and revealed a thin envelope tucked beneath. No stamp, no seal, just a single name on the front, Luke. His throat tightened as he took it. He walked to the old recliner, his chair now worn soft by time and story, and sat down slowly. The family gathered quietly around him. No one spoke. He opened the envelope. Inside was a single page, yellowed but still intact. Grace's handwriting. "Luke, if you're reading this, it means you finally did what I always knew you could stay. Stay long enough to let someone love you again. Stay long enough to believe the world wasn't done with you. I wish I could be there to say it in person. But if I'm not, let this be my last gift. You didn't fail, Sammy. You loved him. That's never failure. You didn't fail me. You saved the ones I couldn't reach. And you didn't fail yourself. You built something better than safety. You built belonging. So here's my final wish. Keep the doors open. Make the house noisy. Let the walls hold more laughter than silence. And if any child ever knocks and says they have nowhere to go, tell them you've been waiting. Always, Grace." The room was still. Then Rosie's voice, trembling with something bigger than her years, whispered. She knew. Luke nodded. He couldn't speak yet. His hand gripped the letter like an anchor. His eyes burned, but the tears didn't fall from pain. Not this time. This time they came from love. From release. From a heart finally light enough to feel it all. Jesse stepped forward. "We could name it after her." Luke blinked. What the place Jesse said. The house, the workshops, the training center you were talking about starting. The hollow Bella added. Like what she used to draw. Luke looked around the room at the faces once worn thin by fear, now lit with purpose. At Rosie, beaming like sunshine. At Elena, her eyes full of faith. At Lily, who had found her voice in silence. He stood slowly and nodded. "We'll call it Grace Hollow." Months passed. The house changed. Luke added new beds, more chairs, a second-hand dining table long enough to seat a dozen. Jake built ramps and shelves. Elena donated half her savings to help open an educational wing. Local volunteers came with hammers and paint touched by the story spreading quietly across the county. They built classrooms, a garden, a small art studio where Lily's first mural now glowed across an entire wall, a hand reaching toward a house on a hill with spirals in the sky like stars. And the front porch, it stayed open. Always. Sometimes strangers arrived, lost teens, exhausted social workers, children with stories in their eyes. And Luke would meet them at the steps, offer them warmth, and say the words his sister left behind. If you've been hurt, this is not the end of your story. If no one believed you, we do. If no one came for you before, we're here now. We've been waiting. On a spring afternoon, Rosie asked to open the box one last time, not for what it held, but for what it began. She set it on the front porch table alongside the framed letter from Grace and a photo of Luke, Elena, and the 6 kids now officially and forever a family. Rosie placed a sticky note on the inside of the lid. It read, "Kindness changed everything." Luke came beside her, slid an arm around her shoulder. "That's the truth," he said. And as the sun dipped behind the trees, casting a golden halo over the land they'd rebuilt, the wind carried Grace's words through the fields and over the roof. A home isn't walls. It's the people who stay. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Share your thoughts in the comments below and let us know what part of the story touched you most. And if this story moved, inspired you, or simply made you feel something real, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world and helps us continue bringing heartfelt stories to life. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, take care and keep believing in the power of kindness.